Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns. Hello, welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton, and this is episode number 76. And I am going to talk a little bit about keto haters. Yep, the people on the internet who think keto is a bunch of bunk, and how I feel about it. Today, I want to dive into something. I think I'm old is maybe what's happening, but I have never watched Reels before, like Instagram Reels or TikTok. They're very similar, I guess. But I did recently. And one of the things that I came across, and I've certainly seen flavors of this out in the world, but one of the things I came across, because they just present you with slide after slide after slide after slide of things, was a lot of people talking smack about the keto. Which, I guess I expected, but, I wanted to talk a little bit today about how I reacted to some of those messagings. And so let's dive into it. Let's just it's a discussion with Kim talking to Kim. So basically, you'll hear this out in the world where people will say, it varies from across the board, all the way from keto is actually actively bad for you to keto is no better than any other approach. It's just whichever one you like better, right? So there's a wide variety. It's a spectrum there, and there are stops along the way that people might say. Then you'll also hear some people saying things like, well, regular keto is good, but you have to do it a little differently for women, and so they're not talking about like individual variations between like Susan and Sally. They're literally saying women different than men, have to do these things differently. So then there's that kind of stuff. So you'll find all these differing opinions. They all go somewhere on that spectrum of there's no real good reason to do keto, right? I'm going to say keto and low carb. Right, I'll put those in the same bucket. Talking to specifically the people that say, well, there's no real true difference between keto and any other diet, depending on what your goals are, what your macros are, what your approach is, if you're trying to lose body fat or you're just in a caloric deficit, like all that kind of stuff. Actually, I don't think that group is wrong if you're metabolically healthy. So if you're dealing with a population of people that are metabolically healthy, so these might be younger people who are trying to lose a few pounds, or athletic people who put on a little bit of weight in their, 20s and 30s, or people who were at healthy body weights doing really well, then they had a baby and now they're trying to lose the baby weight, right? Like, so all these kind of scenarios that you think of as like, they were a pretty healthy person, they've just got a few extra pounds on them, and they want to tighten things up there. They want to meet some new fitness goals. I'm going to say that actually for this population of people, I agree with thee. There's not one better approach than another. It's whichever one works for you, whichever one you can stick to, whichever one makes you happy. Go with that, right? I'm like, yep, I think you're probably right. And I think this is where a lot of the misunderstanding comes from. Because when I see on these TikTok Reels, whatevernesses, younger people, and not just younger people, but mostly they're younger people who've never had significant weight problems and certainly not had significant metabolic issues. They're talking about how keto isn't good and how cutting out carbs isn't good, but they're in the gym every day. They lift weights, they're exercising a ton, like their bodies energetic and glycolytic needs are going to be very different than your average sort of sedentary, metabolically damaged, middle-aged person. So the thing that I feel like is missing in these contexts when these arguments are happening in the internet, as they will, is context. The context is missing. Now, am I saying that keto is the only way to reverse metabolic damage? No. Am I saying that there's only one approach ever? No. But I am saying that person after person after person after person finds keto and they feel like, oh my gosh, it's like the Holy Grail. It's like magic. It's so different. I feel so different. My brain works so different. My hunger signals work so different. All of this is so different for me. And I think that is a really valid thing to be paying attention to. And so if you're listening to this podcast, I mean, most likely you've already made it through that place where you're like, well, I don't know if keto is a good idea because everyone says the bad things about it. But I want to give you guys some things to think about when having discussions with people that might poo-poo your keto diet, which is, one, have grace. It can be really easy when people criticize the thing that is meaningful to you to get defensive. You cannot get defensive. You never win when you get defensive. Quite honestly, I find the Southern, well, bless your heart, to be very helpful in my mind. I might not say that out loud, but if you're Southern, you know what this means. If you're not Southern, let me try and explain, and the Southerners will probably cringe. But basically, when a Southerner says, bless your heart, it's condescending, right? So you don't want to be outwardly condescending, but you do kind of want to say, like, internally, like, oh, I feel kind of bad for this person's perspective. I don't think they've looked at all the variables. And from there, you can be magnanimous, right? You can be generous. You can be open. I ran into a guy on an airplane a couple of, it's months now ago, who was very nice and was telling me about how a good friend of his who's really into health was telling him he shouldn't do keto and wanted to talk about, why and why not. And, I started with, well, he has some points about X, Y, Z, right? He was saying that a very low-fat vegan diet is amazing. I was like, oh, God. Oh, no. Like, internally, I was like, absolutely not. But, always find people right before you make some corrections. So, like, I was right. It is true. Like, you can lower blood sugar on a very low-fat, very high, unprocessed foods approach. Like, all raw foods, like their vegan thing, they do seem to have good blood sugars, but they have to keep the fat below like 10%. It's crazy. I'm like, who can live like that? That's terrible. But I don't like it. I don't want to do it. I don't find most people want to do it, but it's not physiologically wrong what he was saying about that. So I found that point right. I was like, well, this can happen. But let me show you, this, that, and the other thing, because it can also work in another way. Then he was open to hearing it because I wasn't finding him wrong and he wasn't having to get defensive. So to these people who are maybe criticizing you by listening to some of these people, the ones who say, well, if you cut out a food group, you have an eating disorder. It's like, well, if you're gluten intolerant, cutting out gluten doesn't mean you have an eating disorder. It means you have some sense, right? If a food doesn't treat you right, don't continue to engage with it. And so there are some absolute benefits. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up was specifically those of us that have struggled with mental health. And so for this, I don't mean you have to have a diagnosed condition, but a lot of us struggle with having good days. A lot of us struggle with keeping our chin up. A lot of us just struggle to maintain a positive outlook. And I hear from a lot of these people that when they go on keto, when they start a ketogenic diet, their mood stabilizes, they feel better, they feel cheerful, the fog lifts on many more days than it was before. And there is sort of an underpinning for this if you think about it. We know that a ketogenic diet does seem to help alleviate seizures in epileptic people. In the field of mental health, now I'm going to make a lot of jumps here, so don't consider this to mean that, the science is settled, which is a terrible statement anyway, and, this is proof, but it's evidence with some links that might be useful for you to think about and say to someone. So when they're treating depression, bipolar, and various forms of mental illness, including schizophrenia, they find a lot of correlation between what helps epileptics and what helps people with these mental health conditions. So a lot of the drugs they might give people with these mental health conditions were originally created for epileptics. And they find, amazingly, that this drug also helps people with depression issues. Well, a ketogenic diet, we know, helps people who have epilepsy. Not every single person, but a lot of them. And so it's not a crazy leap to think if the kinds of treatment protocols that help on a pharmaceutical level with epilepsy also seem to help with mental health issues, that the lifestyle protocol that helps with epilepsy might also be useful with mental health issues. And so anecdotally, I see this to be true for a lot of people. And then theoretically, it makes sense. And so when I put those two pieces together, it is absolutely a reason that if someone struggles in this arena and they find a ketogenic diet beneficial to them, it makes me sort of mad that people are always trying to sort of knock the feet out from under someone who's doing keto. And so if you're someone who's found enormous benefit or even slight benefit from a ketogenic diet, then I just want to tell you that there are people out there in the world, like this is a surprise, who may not understand what you mean by how important it is to you. So I just wanted to put it out there that there are these people in the world saying these things. And I really think more than anything else, there is just a contextual misunderstanding. Now, the people who actually think keto is harmful from some physiological perspective, I think mostly need to do their research a little better and are using old, outdated information that is easily poked holes in to say it's harmful. And so those people are much more easily combated or disregarded. But it's sort of the people in the middle who might be saying, well, it's not good to cut out a food group, or that's orthorexia, or, well, keto is really no better than any other approach. And I would say that all really depends on who you're talking to, the context of their life, the experience they have, and what works for them. And so I just want to support you in your life in terms of what works for you. Now, over the course of several podcasts, I've mentioned that you might choose not to stay keto at various times, and that can be okay as well. So it's not, as I said in the last episode, a life sentence if you want to have a different style of life when it feels appropriate. But I also want to say that if keto is the thing that is the difference for you between a good life and a not so good life, bravo for holding on to your commitment to the thing that really matters to you. So that was my message for the day, and I hope you have a fabulous week, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled that you're part of the Keto fam. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.